I want to give you another description about how it is that people are wound up and seem to be relating ordinarily to life. If you would picture the center, a calm center at an ever-moving vortex, like a tornado. Besides that being somewhat of an allegorical picture, as I could point out to you that in a quite real sense, the circuits themselves, the way everyone is wired up, is operating as though it were a continually whirling vortex. And just as would happen in the great scientific world, creating this kind of partial vacuum, a lower pressure area within a tornado, it takes that which is nearby and it sucks it into the movement. Now, throughout history, religiously, philosophically, there have been attempts to put yellow circuit descriptions on this phenomenon of being captured by evil spirits, being entangled with the mundane affairs of life, being identified with everything that goes on, to the point, as it has been attempted to be described, that under very extreme conditions, it's almost as though one's own sense of consciousness has now become part of what seems to be this external phenomenon, of being so stressful at the thought of having impending surgery that it's an absolute beautiful example of the great E.D. Fix. That all I do, says the ordinary person, is think about the upcoming surgery. I think about that, I think about blood, I think about needles, I think about dying. No matter what I do, I try to go to the movies, everybody knows. Under ordinary conditions, that is a very common phenomenon, at least to be described in the extreme. But there is, as though the circuits, once they are programmed, which everyone is, below the line, it is literally as though these circuits inside of a person, and it's happening on another level, in what seems to be the great out there, in the body of life itself, but there is a continual running, day and night, of the circuits. And it acts in the same way as creating a kind of low-pressure area, which seems to be oneself, that seems to be consciousness. And that which seems to be going on in your circuits can be seen as this continually whirling vortex, and it will take what seems to be one's sense of individuality, that seems to be one's mind, that seems to be one's attention, that seems to be one's feelings, and it will suck it into what the circuits are running. That may not sound as poetic as being entangled in the great web of Buddha's wheel of illusion or any other, but that is what is going on. And what I began to at least hint to you about last week, about extracting, in a sense, one's own continuing consciousness from the waste products, from the flying debris of this vortex, becomes what, again, many of the religious and philosophical voices have talked about throughout the ages, some kind of centered calm. But it is literally as though you have not escaped, as long as you're alive, the continuing dance of these whirling vortex-ease, or eyes. But it is as though internally there is a continuing calm center. And of course, it is not something that can be faked. People try to fake it. And it is not something that comes about through, on any permanent basis, through the kind of mechanical attempts that life at a lower level has continually tried to make, such as attempting to simply sit in one place and to stare at one's thoughts ad infinitum until and if a day comes that it apparently the whole process has been broken up, and it's as though, the people say, It's as though my mind stopped and I could see. It's as though my mind stopped and I could think. Or through chanting, through drugs. None of that is permanent. None of that really has any validity to anyone attempting this. But the time comes, it's slipping up on some of you, and I have every intention to see that some of you get pushed over the edge very shortly. It is not that you are freed from an awareness of the whirlwind. It's not that you're oblivious to people suffering, to people being upset. You're not in some way blinded to the fact through some great mystical enlightenment that the forces that help life continue to grow also must cut. They must destroy, they must plow up. In your own circuits, were you to step, if you could and if you chose to for whatever reason, I've got no idea. But if you were to choose to step from this calm center, you know that the tornado is always around you. It's always there. The kind of suction that is created by everyone's circuits, no matter how you were wired up and no matter how apparently the wiring was programmed, everyone's circuits operate in such a way, at such a tempo, from those that appear to be the most lethargic, speaking in the ordinary world, to those that seem to be the most hyperactive. This vortex is going on. The circuits are running day and night. And this kind of low pressure, this kind of partial vacuum, sucks up everything, including what would have been the calm center, anything that gets close to it, including specifically that which seems to be a man's individual consciousness. It sucks it from what would or could be a calm center, and everything is pulled right out to the perimeter of the tornado. And hence the feeling that every decent, right-thinking, ordinary, good human can recognize that it seems as though it is a blisteringly fast merry-go-round wherein everything is grabbed, pulled, pushed, people are flung off, ideas are flung off. You can't even paint the son of a bitch because it's going so fast that paint flies off of it. You can't repair it. You can't stop it. You can't even find out how it got started. And here I am stuck in it. But one of the few things that I would assure you that that is not necessarily so. Oh. But note with everyone, it seems in the beginning, and then for a long time, according to how long your beginning must be, that whatever this may be leading to, however it could be described, it's got to be a series, some kind of linear series, some kind of progression here that I go through, wherein I am knocking off one of my problems after another. But when you begin to see that it is not a linear process, that it is not you, it is not some kind of psychological you that has been traumatized in some kind of linear fashion and rolled up like a ball of twine, and in some way I will go back and I will unravel this mystery. Once you begin to see that it is as though what little piece of consciousness seems to be extant in people, it is as though they are individually, and then on a larger level, but individually, they are standing, their own physical body is the perimeter of a never-ending vortex. And the circuits, don't worry about just running up and down in some way, in the kind of diagrams I've drawn, but you are a moving tornado. That is part of the job of the circuits. It is part of the transfer of energy. It is part of moving information. And internally, then that which would seem to be one's individual self, it is continually sucked into the movement. Hence these partial apparent, at least placebos or timeouts that life seems to have offered, from drugs to alcohol with some people, attempts at meditation, attempts at prayer, people that just simply want to go off and be a hermit, and almost everyone with feelings, at least periodically in their life, that I have just got to get away from all this, a vacation. If I can just go out and lay on a beach and not have to punch a clock and not have to listen in to problems, I'm just sure it would rejuvenate me. Whether it has any lasting effect or not is the feeling, if I can just get out of this turmoil physically. There is a very calm place, which is not synonymous with the ordinary world complacent, but there is a very calm place, but it has to be outside the hold, the reach, the mechanical affinity of the vortex of the circuits. And that only comes about, as I've described in one way, in the production of a new circuit. Because everything that everyone is born with, everybody, is wired up, no matter where you came from, no matter what your background was, and then you are programmed by where the merry-go-round, where the level of life is at that time, in such a way that at line level, at ordinary level of consciousness, there is no escape from this. You can go out and attempt to hermitize yourself. See, I can join in with yuppiedom and make up new words, and I don't even have an MBA. You can hermitize yourself physically, but everyone's had little occasions of that. I'll go off on a vacation and I'll forget all these problems and all the bills I've got and my business falling apart. You can certainly remove yourself bodily to Daytona or to Palm Beach and lay there, but once you can smell it in yourself, and then others, you can walk by and see little bodies laying out sweating in the sun, motionless, and when you go by, you can hear you can hear the roar of a tornado. It is simply all of the information, all of the experience that has been available up to line level consciousness in people cannot extract itself, cannot defend itself against what is absolutely, what it amounts to, vis-a-vis other things, is a scientific fact that the runnings, the continual runnings physically of the circuits create a low pressure system in what would apparently be the center, which everyone feels is, well, me. It's my consciousness, it's my awareness of me. That thing is dragged into the vortex itself. So that if you could take ordinary people, if you could take yourself at ordinary level and in some way pull apart this shell, today they might call it the psychological shell, the false personality, the acquired personality of each person, and you could crack it open. That is, the way I'm describing it to you tonight, you could pull apart this vortex to get to the center. You know what you would find? It would be calm and quiet enough, but no one's there. Which is a little of the humor, although I don't guess many of you have had occasion to really look back and to see it yet, of me making jokes in the beginning about don't worry if you feel like you're going crazy, and then some of you I told you it's too late, and you couldn't go crazy now if you wanted to. Because to go crazy in the ordinary sense, it would be to get inside that vortex, apparently, just through accidental means, that the vortex seems to be coming apart, and inside there's nobody there. That is the natural state, that consciousness is part of the vortex. It is a calm, continuing spot that can move just like out in the ordinary physical world, like a tornado itself. No matter where it goes, in the center of it is a spot where nothing is happening. When you can be there and look 10 feet away, and it looks like Dante revisited. But right there in the center, as it moves along, nothing's happening. I guess if these kind of comments fell into the wrong hands, you could have people say, well, that doesn't sound like much of a sales pitch for whatever this is. Do I look like a salesman? I've had several notes from people out of town listening to the tapes, seeing the tapes, having to do with the question of evil. The newer people, as sincerely as they can be, still believing that they're wrestling or being wrestled with by the question of evil. There's surely something going on in life, regardless of your diagrams and descriptions of modes and forces, that there are things that simply per se within themselves surely must be evil. It's just too clear to me. Let me try it one more time, or one more way. It certainly takes a certain amount of ordinary time and involvement with this for someone to begin to see it. If I have not admitted to you newer people that often enough. But let me give you another way to chew on this, is that everyone is wired up to apparently be on the side of either C or D in any situation. Now, you've got enough experience in your own life in the past, and some of you continually, presently, to understand, to see quite clearly, regardless of where you believe it came from. When I say that absolutely everyone is wired up to feel as though they're on the side of C or D, everyone believes in any situation that they are on the side of C, the side of goodness, decency, propriety. They then see that they're always opponents to this. So when I say that everyone is wired up to be on the side of C or D, if you are at ordinary level, your perception is going to be that you are on the side of C, but there's always somebody on the side of D. Now, once you make a decent effort along the kind of task and ways that you should be doing on your own, but now that you can look up on life, you can read the news, you can just look out on the street to what goes on in situations which you are not mechanically attracted to, and you see two other groups of people involved with taking sides. And then you see quite clearly, both of them think that they're on the side of C. And both of them think that the other is on the side of D. So what I want you to try and keep in your awareness is the fact that still, what I started out saying, is that everyone is wired up to be on the side of C or D. So if you're apparently not wired up to be involved in this situation, you can see that, yes, indeed, these two people, these two parties, these two groups are wired up to be on the side of C or D. Then the question becomes, after you begin to see some of that, if you're presented with the query of which side are you on, then you can no longer answer in some binary fashion once you begin to see it, that you are simply on life's side, and you cannot distinguish that I am going to be on the side of that which I am wired up to be, no matter that it would seem from perhaps all cultural, religious, family, and even ordinary people, of course, eventually are made to believe that this is part of my doing. Not only did my family believe this, I believe this because it is right. That you cannot be on the side of either C or D, because everyone is wired up to be on one side or the other. And if one side could finally prevail, you would have the impotent heaven. You would have the one world retreat of albinos. In every sense of the word, you would have people who are neither this nor that. You would have a living graveyard. I want to ask you a question. I gave you one little piece of this some months ago, but a new version of it. Everyone has this experience. Everyone has had this experience. Perhaps through fatigue, perhaps through being ill for whatever reason, or in times past, or even at one of our parties, it could be through the consumption of alcohol. That you might find yourself somewhere, let's leave it with fatigue or illness or who knows what, instead of alcohol, that you would find yourself somewhere, perhaps trying to make a purchase, and you're having to read up about what the item is, and you're having to compare prices, and you're trying to look at 3 or 4 items here to look at all of their sales characteristics, all of that which they have, all of that which they lack, and you're trying to compare, and then you're checking the price, and then you're trying to figure, well, if this one has such and such ability and it costs such and such, and the other one has these 2 or 3 points, but it doesn't do this, but it's, let's see, is that 30% less than, or, and then, to use ordinary terminology, it seems to strike you, wait a minute, I am in no condition, my thinking processes are in no condition to make a decision. I cannot trust my thinking process right now. And the proper course of action would seem to be, well, I'm smart enough to realize that. Thank you, sir, madam, I'll come back later. Is to leave, aware of the fact, well, if I'd made a decision right now, it would not have been a decision made with my best faculties. Right. Now I got a question for you, and it seems quite clear that there's no doubt. In fact, I'm glad that I'm aware of the fact. I'm not glad that I'm fatigued or I'm befuddled, that I'm sicker than I thought, the flu's had me or whatever it is, this bug I've had, and I just stand here and I've gone over the same thing several times trying to compare this. I just can't, my thinking processes are not functioning properly. I'm just not going to make a decision. I want to know this. What is it in a person that looked upon the thinking process and judged it unfit? What, who is it within one that knew about this present faulty thinking process? When you're in ordinary conditions, there is no such apparent analyzation going on. Let us say that you were at your line level consciousness norm. You decide, well, I want to buy one of these, or here I am and they're on sale. I've got a few minutes, and you'd look at it. You'd make a proper calculation of which one is the better buy. You would stand there and try to determine, foresee in the future, well, I need all of the elements and gadgets to this model, or would I be better buying this one? Would I never need these other things that this one does? You might even take out a pen and pencil and do some calculations. You might stand back and ask the salesperson, wait just a second. You might ask a couple of other questions like, well, are these the main 2 models of this? Do you have another one that you're out of? How often do these go on sale? You would seem to have covered all of that which would reasonably look after your own best interest. But at that time, if we could stop everything and say, all right, who are you at that ordinary level? A person will be no more than the thinking process. I mean, besides the lower circuits. They got up to that which seems to be unique in man, the I, that which seemed to be in them. If you'd said, who are you? How can you distinguish yourself? Then if the person had the ability in any degree to appear into what I'm speaking of, their sense of who they are in the last few minutes would have been the thinking process over comparing these 2 items or these several items, comparing their prices, trying to foresee in the future if you would need all of the elements that this one contains. And other than that, there was no I. That the vortex of what was going on, that was one's sense of who they were. So how is it that continually people can apparently judge the thinking process to be faulty, to be less than maximally efficient, and therefore perhaps I'll back away from it, or I'll put off a decision? The point being that there seems to be something beyond the thinking process that can judge the thinking process to be inadequate. Where did it suddenly come from? Why is it not operating all the time? When there seems to be no such self-analyzation, then where is this thing, whatever it is, that in my instance I'm giving you, judge the thinking process to be less than maximally or even minimally efficient? Where is it when it's not being used? Where did it come from? If at the ordinary level, if it's just the yellow circuit activity is one's whole sense of consciousness, I am what I think right now, and I'm thinking about these two items and their relative prices and their relative merits. What else was going on in you for the last few minutes? Well, almost nothing, if they had the ability to look back, or if you had the ability to see. If you could take their yellow circuit activity and turn it into a page on a book, into a picture that you could observe. There were little flashes in the last 2 or 3 minutes of somebody came up and you thought they were about to break in line, or you were about to ask the salesperson something, and somebody else broke in rudely. And the thinking process may have made some curse about them. Might have been many little things in the last several minutes of wondering what time it is when you've got to pick up your wife or your husband, and how much longer should I fool with this? Or another little thing struck you: did I see this on sale at Kmart last week? But other than that, would seem to be some kind of linear process going on, that the thinking process was not observing itself, was not analyzing itself. It all seemed to be running in a proper course. So when the feeling that I am not up to par, my thinking process at this moment cannot be fully trusted, and I'm aware of it. Thank God that I have the ability, I'm aware of it. I'm not going to push it. I'm simply aware my thinking processes are not optimally clear. What is this thing that suddenly arises and says the thinking process is not going on correctly? What is it, and where is it when it's not doing that? Another one for you. I have, especially over the last year, continually given questions, rhetorical questions, thrown out examples. When apparently we're referring to the life and the behavior of humanity, and me trying to get you to try, and at least laterally, until you can push it up otherwise, to expand your awareness of what's going on by trying to continually neuralize and ask yourself, this appears to be obviously, at the ordinary level, a strictly human phenomenon I'm observing. And for me to say, this is life doing this through man. And me saying, pointing out in the last 6 months, has almost been a wildfire in this country of society apparently suddenly up in arms over drunk driving. You know, when people have been killing themselves on the highway, I don't know if the ratio has gone up greatly in the last few years, but just, it's like suddenly humanity came to its senses, at least in this part of the world. And I point out to you that it can also be seen, not just allegorically in some weird way, but it absolutely can be seen that life itself, some parts of life, is drinking too much, or telling itself, you got to cut down. It should strike, in a not unexpected manner, parts of everyone's own circuitry and your own ears of hearing such matters, that if, indeed, I am telling you correctly that there is more of a connection between my body of life and your body than some parabolic, some allegorical connection, then it would be not unpredictable that what would strike the circuit says, well, all right, for one thing, or maybe all of it, we're talking about a matter of size. Because we're talking about this handful of people putting together an organization, or one person that you know. The one person could have been you if I hadn't stopped you. I've been drinking too much. I mean, there's just no doubt I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop, and then if I start back, I'm going to really cut down. All right. If this is a reflection of the absolute body of life, then obviously we're talking about a matter of degree and size, because I'm talking about me feeling that. For God knows why, it just suddenly struck me. I can come up with reasons that, well, I hadn't been feeling well, and I got too many hangovers, and I began to shake a little. So it's a difference between me, almost an infinitesimal speck, I guess, here on this planet, and then the known universe. So if I'm beginning in some other group of people, organizations springing up, believing the Americans drink too much, then it's got to be a matter of size. Then if I'm going to look upon the known universe, at the very least, as being the body of life, then the degree to which it feels that, I mean, it's the magnitude of difference in size is just almost unthinkable. But it is not simply a matter of size difference. And I'm not going much further with this tonight, but it'd be no less than quite expected that that is the way it would strike everyone, that if any of you have tried to pursue this further, or if now you even have the ability to periodically be aware of some phenomenon in you or in life, and then try and relate it, to try and at least remember that, all right, whatever's going on is in some way a lesser reflection, relatively speaking, than something is going on in the body of life itself. Whether you have any decent suspicion of what that is, just obviously, if we're going to look at this as being some phenomenon going on with humans, then the degree to which it is going on in the body of life is just almost unbelievably larger in size. But the reason I'm throwing it out tonight is that will only go so far, because that is not the problem. That is not the question. It is not a matter of the difference in size, although that is true. But that is not what the true difference is. It's a matter of unseen additional dimensions, which is a whole other ball game than size. Of saying, all right, if we had, for me just make up a figure, right now, if we had 2% of the world's population seem to be caught up in a personal vortex of having a fear over nuclear destruction, that is, people whose life now seems to be devoted, that their continuing thoughts seem to revolve around some activity, or some at least worry, whether they're doing anything or not, over the possible nuclear destruction of humanity. All right, if that be true, and then would it not be true that 2% of life's body, 2% of life's consciousness, must be involved with the same kind of fear for it to get to us, for it to make some segment of humanity claim and just swear that they can smell it, they can predict it. The rate we're going, it's just, we're going to be gone another 10 years, or somebody says 20, or somebody says 5. You know, we just are. Then we've got to multiply 2% of the world's population be, let's say, this size. 2%, I'm just going to have to make this up. It probably won't be close. But since astronomers and people do things like this, if 2% of the world's population was the size of a dime laying on the ground, then 2% of the known universe's size would be what? The size of the Milky Way? I'm just making that up, but it would be a dime perhaps laying on the planet Earth, and that in relationship to the whole Milky Way, our whole galaxy, which is, you can't really do much with that, except, well, except to go, shoo, that is surely, it puts you in your place. It makes you realize that if 2% of the world's population is worried about this, then think, relatively speaking then, it would be equal to our whole solar system. I mean, our whole galaxy, the Milky Way, That part of life's own consciousness is worried. Now, boy, it must be giving life fits. I mean, if some of these people are as worried as they're saying, they'll go out and go to jail and give up their lives and be arrested, and think how this must be bothering life. And it is not that simple, because it is not a matter of difference in size. It is a matter that what is describable here. And me to say whatever this is a reflection of what's going on in life. It is not simply a matter of expanding this in all possible three-dimensional directions, trying to compare a dime laying on the ground on the planet Earth to the size, again speaking in volume, in 3 dimensions of our solar system, of our galaxy. What you're talking about and what cannot ever be seen by ordinary consciousness. That's why this has always been so elusive, why people can't find God, is it is unseen additional dimensions. And instead of looking for an expansion in size, you've got to be able to find places where there are right angles that are not three-dimensional. It does not mean that the size, of course, is not different, but the difference in size, you can only go so far with that. That's why I bring it up finally now. Any of you that still can get something from that kind of immediate size differentiation that may strike you, go ahead. But that comes to an end fairly shortly. You just can't go anywhere else with it. And so I tell you, it is not a matter of size. It is a difference in what seems to be life here and what seems to be perceptible. And then additional unseen dimensions that is going off at a right angle somewhere else. So it's not simply that life has, speaking in 3 dimensions of length, breadth, and width, that if you have a headache that big, that life has a headache that big, or that if you have, hostility the size of a pinpoint, then life has hostility the size of our solar system. It is not simply a difference in size. It is a difference in additional unseen dimensions going at what would amount to right angles. Although I will admit, once you begin to see that, it's not really right angles. Because if it could be described, it could be described. If it could be described, then theoretically people could see it. And theoretically you can't see it. Or if you prefer, you can't see it theoretically. But the angles are there and you can be aware of them. And people throughout history have been aware of them, or this would not have gone on. But then to attempt to describe it in what would seem to be straightforward terms, then the past has been, well, this is going on in human life because the gods have dictated so-and-so. The gods got mad, and later it got to be, well, the gods have set up rules, and men won't live by them. The matter of trying to take a difference in size, as religions want to point out, when it comes at the ordinary level, of the gods being omnipotent, omnipresent, all of that, can you hear it, is always a matter of them taking the 3 dimensions of life and expanding it in 3 dimensions. That although you might say safely that a fair segment of our population in this part of the world in this generation is no longer tied as strongly to some of these pictures, many of you are old enough that you should be aware that you're at least grandparents. And many religions were still teaching, and some of them are still alive, that, fuck the space shuttle and all these moonshots. That's some kind of liberal atheist trick. Heaven is actually up here, like the Bible said. God, forget all this new communistic feminism. God is a man, like the Bible says. It says he. God is a man, and he's up there somewhere. I mean, it says right there in Genesis, he made us in his image. And of course, then you get into other questions, but the thing is, the idea of there actually being a physical God somewhere outside of you, outside this system, something that went boom and created it outside of itself, still, they can say, well, he's all-knowing, he's all-powerful, he's all-everything. But still all they can come up with is to take humanity, take human life, and expand it in 3 dimensions. that, yeah, I'm smart enough to know there's a God. But the difference between me and him is he knows everything. I just know, a lot. The difference in me, I can love some of my enemies, especially communists in the Southern Republic of Yemen, I never see. I don't have to put up with them. I can love my enemies. But I admit, my great aunt drives me nuts. But God, he loves everybody. I can control my temper sometimes. God can control his temper all the time. It has always been, at ordinary level, no matter what it's called, it's always been a matter of size differential. Now, if you just get carried along by the way life is wired up and you're caught up in the vortex of some religion or some philosophy, it does not sound that way. But once you can see what I'm talking about, it is always taking humanity, it's taking human life, and expanding it dimensionally, limited to this. That's all you can do. You can sit down at ordinary level and think, all right, I'm going to come up with a new description of God. I feel there's got to be something else. There's got to be something in charge here. Try and describe what it is. Call upon all of your past experience and reading of poetry, philosophy, that you're going to come up with a description of the real God. I mean, these religions, they've been fooling around. The Arabs make an Arab God, the Jews come up with a Jewish God, the Christians come up with a whole fragmentation, a whole basket of gods. I'll put it all together. I have some feeling. I am a fairly sensitive person. I am well read enough, and I've thought enough, and I've gone off and sit by myself for hours at a time. I will come up with a description of the God. I know I can feel it. And all you can come up with is to take the three dimensions of life, of man, and expand them. And you take whatever the consciousness is, the awareness are, people, if they are better, if they're degrees of progress in humanity, then what are the favorable attributes? All right, someone who's kind. Okay, then God is the kindest of anybody. All right, smart. All right, God is smarter than anybody. Okay, people who have self-control. All right, God has absolute self-control. Nothing could bug God. Steadfastness of purpose. God's got it. Once he makes up his mind, forget it. That's all you can do. All right, humans would be tolerant. Hey, tolerant, you want to talk tolerance? God, he would tolerate anything. But all it can do is move as an expansion in size. And for humanity in general, they know they've never been satisfied. They're not supposed to be. And for the few people that ever get caught up into this, they're extremely unsatisfied with it, because the expansion in size is not the question. And by me telling you quite properly that that which is going on in life is going on in the body of life itself. What people think, what people say, what humanity does is a reflection of what's going on in life. Not some allegorical, it is actually going on. We're in the body of life. But there comes a point very soon, for those of you that begin to see it all, that to just keep trying to neuralize it or just accept it. Even worse, all right, well, it's a matter of size. Humanity's doing this, and so that means life's doing it, just a whole lot more of it. It's not that that's not true, but that is not the way to pursue it. It is not simply an expansion in size. It is that what is going on in life is going on in a way that is dealing with unseen additional dimensions. We're going to do some of the questions. Being involved with this seems more... Start again. I'll just read the question part. Why is it that I cannot seem to do for myself that which you do for me? The answer is simple. It's initially that people do not know what to do. Now, I'm not saying that to insinuate the question was not serious, because everyone feels some of that finally, anyone who belongs here, of the feeling that, well, in some way I should be weaning myself from what appears to me to be some dependence upon you. Or why is it you can come up with a task, or I can ask you some specific something about my own personal little life, and I can say, well, do so-and-so, and it just seems like, my God, I should have known that. Or in a sense, worse yet, have voices say, oh, I knew that. I just needed, I need somebody to reaffirm it. I mean, I was almost going to say what I should do, and it didn't really seem to have any validity until you said it. It is not a personal foible. It is not a weakness. The truth is, initially, it's because nobody knows what to do. The information is not available in life. If you knew what to do, if you were what we were discussing last week in that stratigraph, if you were indeed a sophisticated, rational, self-serving person, then whatever information was available that would be the most beneficial to you, you would use that information. Either that or you'd just be an absolute idiot. So you're left with, all right, I've always done the best I could. It wasn't enough, and I had to blame somebody, and by and large, I took the blame. The information is not readily available in life. It is not what life needs at the general level. And although, in a sense, the more you begin to understand, or some of you might say the longer you're here, it begins to sound less and less complex. But the truth is, you'd never thought of it. You had never seen it. You had never tried this or that. It's just the way it works. So until the time that you do become, in some way, a parasitic invalid, which if you do, I'll throw you out, or at least I give you warning, that's not a problem anymore with what we have here. But it's a waste of time. It's an imaginary enemy right now for any of you to really fear, to carry this question to its a little further extreme, for any of you to fear, well, wait a minute, I am becoming a cripple. There's something wrong with me because I can't seem to do things that in some way you seem to make me do or help me do or cause me to do or you do for me. Nobody's to the point to worry about that. I'm the first one to worry about it. It is simply that you don't know what to do. That's it. How unmystical can it be? If you knew what to do, you'd have done it, right? Being a reasonable, sane, as it turns out, exceptional person, which you all are. If you had known what to do, you'd have done it. Or somebody told you what to do, you'd have done it. You asked people, you read books, people volunteered information from whom you didn't even solicit any. Is acting the most profitable way to foresee yourself? That is an excellent question. I've never had anybody frame it in that way. Is acting the most profitable way to foresee yourself? It is as though you were talking about my real acting, where I am now, the attempt to continually act, even when you're alone. It is to force yourself to operate in what amounts to an unnatural light, an unexpected light. It's such an unexpected light for those few people who need to be doing it. The unexpected light, you begin to see things about what seems to be yourself that you would have never seen. This kind of unexpected light has that ability. That I pointed out, or attempted to, that it's not even easy to tell someone of any specific benefit from doing this. The kind of, as I attempted at the time to make them almost extreme examples of, say, you're staying around with people you don't even know, there's nothing going on, and just you're waiting for your car to be fixed, or you're waiting in line to get your automobile tag, or and whatever it is, it's just for no particular reason. It's just stand and know that you're acting. And it's do things that you would have to pick up somewhere, that you can picture Greta Garbo or Clint Eastwood, the guy I used to live next door to, that he'd stand here and lean like this, and I would have never done this. And to try and tell specifically somebody, do this, and here is what you will gain from it. justice prevails. Not only is it unprofitable to try to tell somebody why they should do this, but those kind of people that would want such a description and some kind of sales pitch wouldn't benefit from it. I wouldn't talk to them anyway. I wouldn't be telling them that. And so notice there is a justifiable equation at work. There's only people like you that would try it. But I say, well, I can't tell you much. You just have to do it for no particular reason. Then you have to be these kind of unexpected people who'll go, all right, I'll try it. Because you cannot say in some specific way that this is going to be the great benefit. Points 1 through 4. 5. That here's how you'll benefit from 5. How you'll benefit from this. It is, what amounts to it is producing an unexpected light. You can see things. Now, I know this is indeed an allegorical sounding statement, but it is like it produces a different kind of light. While you're doing it, you can see things about what appears to be you that you have never seen. But it is of no value to say or to respond to any question about, well, what? What might I see? Well, I know it when I see it. Will it be of something of real importance or just kind of small importance? Will it be a shock to me? Will I be glad I did it? But all you've got to do is do something that you would normally do if it's just stand, which is using the full term that you have of your miners and assembly line workers. The obvious place, the easy place to start is to do it. And it is forcing, for those that can benefit from it, is forcing a kind of unexpected light. And you can see things that they just, well, I'm not going to try to convince you anymore. It was just a thought. You can try it if you'd like to. Regarding what seems to be the levels or stages of doing this, is it possible to say that one could leave one phase while having not done a thorough job of it and move on to some other phase? I'm paraphrasing this, but this was the intent of it. That is it possible? There is not a feeling for those doing this at any instance that I have now conquered this one thing. I can now strike silly poses and it doesn't bother me. I now no longer get infuriated when I hear that my mother has called me again. That is not the way it operates. And the way the person put the question, is it possible to leave one phase while having not done a thorough job of that and apparently move on? All right, let me deal with part of the specific terminology the person used. No one looked at from an ordinary level of you trying to, right after the fact, let's say, use my example, that apparently you're no longer as hostile toward your mother as you were, that some of this kind of dancing tension seems to have left, but then, for maybe this to come into your awareness, and then try to look upon it, and perhaps then there seem to be voices in you saying, well, wait, now you don't fully understand that. You have not thoroughly beaten that. She could make you mad. I mean, there is no way you right now could not write down a perfect, satisfying description of how, if you label your little paper, how I learned to quit arguing with my mother. I could not do it. It just seems like I'm no longer as hostile. There seems to be some kind of tension between us that has diminished just to an astounding degree, but I surely haven't done a thorough job of it. I can't just leave this area because I could not really explain to you what has happened. You have done a thorough job of anything when you know it, the locale, well enough to be able to freely leave it, not analyze it, not talk about it. But remember, I had Kairut once, where I allowed him to point out to you that you cannot truly leave a place until you know it thoroughly. Any feeling that any of you would have, which would not be in any means out of the ordinary for the voices to say, well, you shouldn't be over here worried about him talking about particle physics and the nature of human consciousness when you still get heart flutters when your mother calls you. Not as bad, but I have not done a thorough job of it. I can't say that I love her from top to bottom and I don't ever think any hostile thoughts, so I've not done a thorough job of it. You have done a thorough job of it. If you have freely left it, that is a thorough job. What is the basis of nervousness? For instance, why would a man shake before a group of his peers when he was about to do something he is quite able and competent to do? Commonly known as stage fright. There is a reality to this, and it has to do with energy transfer. And I would suggest to you that there is no one alive that does not feel some of that. Whether you're talking about Frank Sinatra, Billy Graham, or an ordinary person who is beyond their volunteering, chosen by the local PTA or the local Petunia Society, is next week, at least get up and read out the calendar. The secretary won't be here, so you get the calendar of the coming events and read it, and it's 5 little old men or women sitting in a library room, half asleep. But let me point this out. It is not some kind of head phobia. And I'm sure that psychology somewhere has gotten around to doing some kind of work on this, without any doubt. And to them, stage fright, whether it be dealing with a man who must get up at the annual stockholders meeting and read some kind of report. He may be a man with several degrees from Harvard or Princeton, may be well-moneyed, good background, and he finds out, if I'm going to have to get up and talk to just a group of people, even people I know, every time this happens, I get so sweaty, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I mean, we're not talking about being on stage at Circus in Vegas. I understand that. But I'm telling you, I almost get sick. I can feel myself trembling. And they can turn up the air conditioner all they want, and I'm soaking wet. I feel sick. Now, psychology, of course, would look at that as being a head problem. But it is not a head problem. It is a nexological fear that indeed, in our time and place, the Yellow Circuit attempts to dissect and diagnose on the basis of the so-called physical versus psychological basis. But we're back to one of the questions I should remind you at least every week on, most of you. It's trying to get some feel for yourself, not a verbal answer, of how did this come about that it seems so clear. I can apparently distract you on a good night, and apparently sometimes you almost think you're beginning to see through cracks, or sometimes you begin to think, I have almost taken the body and the mind, and I almost, for a split second, almost crammed those son of a bitches together. And yet everything in you, the highest level of life's consciousness right now, I mean, there are people, life is already beginning to push against the edges, coming about through science, hard science as opposed to psychology, as I pointed out, but it's happening. But still right now, at line level consciousness, the highest level within that line is still the mentation, the feeling, the perception, that without any doubt it can be proven. I can prove it. I can join in with them. There is a psychological self and there is a physical self. There's just no doubt. In fact, I could use that as one description to answer the question I presented to you earlier. Where does this thing come from that says, wait a minute, my thinking is faulty? I could use this very thing as part of the answer. But the feeling that, wait a minute, this is a head problem. stage fright? Do you feel like the people are going to attack you physically? Well, certainly not. Do you feel like somebody's going to pull out a bow and arrow or throw smoke bombs at you when you read the annual report? The company's paying the greatest dividends of its life. Nobody knows you. Look at yourself. You're well dressed. You're articulate. Do you actually believe someone's going to physically attack you? Well, certainly not. Think about that. Yeah, you're right. There's no basis for this. It's a psychological fear. It's some kind of personal head illusion. It's obvious. Psychosomatic illness, we're surrounded by it. There's no doubt that this thing can affect everything else. I can prove it to you. If I can join anything, prove it to me any day of the week. Yeah, no doubt about it. Except it's not true. But that is the kind of question that I suggested in times past to many people was one of the more opportune portals to find yourself whirling through. Is how does this seem so real? What purpose is being served? How is it that in my more lucid, unnatural moments, I realize that is not true? But by and large, let us say 99% of the time at least, that is just a glaring, self-evident, undebatable fact. And it's all I can do to drag myself away from it. All I can do to drag myself away from that. All I can do to try and pull my consciousness away from it, accepting that as being an irrefutable reality. All I can do for me to hardly pull myself away from that. It is a quite real fear, as opposed to an illusionary fear, since there's not one. But it is a nexological fear, as opposed to the great division of the psychological self as opposed to the physical self. But who did that? Did the body come up with that? Did the lower circuits come up in any way? Did they contribute to this? You've got your own miners, you've got your own factory workers, you've even got your own people down advertising, those that are sane enough to converse with. Find out, what did they contribute to this reality, this theory, this idea? In what way did the miners, the bricklayers, did they contribute to this notion that, hey, we're one set of operations, but upstairs another set. Sure, we're connected, and they can rain on our parade and make us sick and all kinds of things that we've heard about through them, but what did they contribute? What would be their opinion of it if you could separate them from the LS circuit? What is life apparently doing and saying through man with sidekicks? For instance, in the movies, cartoons, novels, etc. Generally, here's a couple I may just read. The attempt, as you describe it, to withhold one's verbal self, that is from speaking in one's daydreams, shatters the effectiveness they have in the private voices pretending to be public. Why does it seem to ordinary consciousness to be so useful to talk it out in your head as though it helps? When you don't let these voices speak, you literally are not telling yourself who you are. Yet they seem to be so necessary to being ordinary. I certainly won't argue with that. If the people who are to come around this, as it expands physically, don't really get understanding from it in the full sense, it doesn't matter, does it? It's something that has a life, and as it lives, it will serve its own purpose regardless, in spite of, because of, while and for everything. Justice just got more astoundingly beautiful. I'm going to read several of some short responses that came from some of the newer people in some of the other cities that have heard a few tapes. Of course, we're talking about people who've just been exposed to these tapes for a matter of months, and some of them got one glorious look at me publicly. But one of what this person asked is, they refer to something I'd said about absolute, they apparently are quoting something I'd said, absolute curtailments with respect to the progress one can make without your actually being present. What are such curtailments and what can be accomplished at a distance? Whatever I have said in the past, and the person didn't refer to exactly the context, but I know I've said such things to everybody to some degree. You cannot let, if I state it as an absolute curtailment, if I just say it's an absolute physical fact that I can't affect, if that's true, so what? Now what? If you are somewhere else, you've got to do what is possible. If you let such a statement begin to be part of your own involvement with a personal whirlwind, then you're accomplishing nothing. It's a matter of what you can apparently accomplish, what apparently is being accomplished presently, but you can't get involved with the fact that you now have voices that may try to tell you, well, this may be a waste of time because he says it can only go so far without him being here. Well, I may die tomorrow. What would anybody do? And the person also asked, what is the purpose of a group? Which, many people have asked, but I'll give you another answer. It's to form a body for my circuit. Life itself not being simply a matter of expanded size, but it being a matter of unseen additional dimensions. See if you can find me one, and write it down, of a possible additional dimension. Next week is my intention. We're going to have some of the people here from out of town. It's my intention to make a real statement about what we'll be doing publicly. And I would suggest that some of you will find it frightening. And then I would suggest that any real thrill seeker understands by now that all real entertainment contains some degree of fear. But I dare say that some of you are going to find it frightening in a jolly way. I assume that all the aphorisms will be in and from out of town, and those of you who didn't have them in that gave me some reason, I sent back word for you to give me a specific time. And I want to mention one other thing to everybody here and somewhere else. To repeat, any of you that have a real specific sensation concerning diet that conflicts with anything I have said about what should be or what I accept as eating habits here, and etc. If you can feel quite specifically that at times all of your circuits, at least from here down, are telling you something in conflict and screaming out, is feed them. And another little thing.